The night my brother held a knife to my throat was the night I finally understood that blood means nothing when it's being used to bleed you dry. I stood there in my childhood kitchen in Tampa, the same kitchen where Mom used to make pancakes on Sunday mornings, and watched Mike's hands shake as he pressed the blade against my skin. His eyes were wild, desperate, the eyes of a man who had just lost everything he thought was rightfully his. Behind him, our parents stood frozen, and I remember thinking how fitting it was that they were paralyzed now after years of enabling his every move. The party guests had fled. The investors he'd been bragging to had scattered like roaches when the lights came on. And there, in his moment of complete unraveling, I felt nothing but a cold, crystalline clarity. Before we go any further, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever been expected to sacrifice everything while someone else takes all the credit, hit that like button. Subscribe, because this story gets so much darker before it gets better. And drop a comment telling me if you've ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own survival. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this ends. But let me take you back to where it all started, because you need to understand the full picture of how a family can slowly cannibalize one of their own. 2 years before that knife touched my throat, I was a completely different person. I was Cheryl Carter, the dutiful daughter, the one who always said yes, the one who worked overtime at my data analyst job in Atlanta so I could send money home to help with Grandma's medical bills. I was 22 then, fresh out of college, still believing that if I just worked hard enough, sacrificed enough, my parents would finally see me as worthy, that they would finally look at me the way they looked at Mike. My brother was the golden child had been since the day he was born. 6 years older than me, he was the firstborn son in a family that treated that title like royalty. Dad ran a modest commercial real estate business in Florida, nothing huge, but enough to make a decent living. The dream was always that Mike would take over, expand it, turn the Carter name into something bigger. I was just supposed to be supportive, get a nice stable job, maybe marry well, and cheer from the sidelines. Grandma Carter was different, though. She was the one who built the foundation of everything our family had. Back in the 70s, she and Grandpa bought their first rental property in Hillsborough County, then another, and another. By the time Grandpa died in 2005, they owned 8 rental homes scattered across Tampa and the surrounding areas. Grandma kept managing them herself well into her 70s, collecting rent-handling repairs, keeping meticulous records in her neat handwriting. I was close to Grandma in a way Mike never was. He was too busy with his own life, his business ventures, that never quite panned out his expensive tastes, that always exceeded his actual income. I would visit her every few months, flying down from Atlanta on my own dime. We would sit on her screened-in porch overlooking the little pond behind her house, drinking sweet tea, and she would tell me stories about building something from nothing. She told me once when I was about 23 that she saw herself in me. That made me cry, though I tried to hide it. She noticed anyway. She always noticed. It was around that time that I started noticing things were off with the family finances. Mike had been put in charge of managing repairs and maintenance for Grandma's rental properties. Dad thought it would be good experience, teach him responsibility. Mike talked a big game about property management, about upgrading the units, about maximizing returns. He would show up at family dinners with spreadsheets and presentations talking about his vision for the portfolio. But Grandma started mentioning little things to me. How Mike said a roof repair cost $15,000, but when she called the contractor herself, they quoted $7,000. How he needed $20,000 to replace HVAC units in 3 properties, but only 2 units actually got replaced. She was sharp as a tack, even at 78. She started keeping her own notes, started asking questions that Mike deflected with charm and technical jargon. I should have paid more attention then. I should have dug deeper. But I was caught up in my own life, my own career, and frankly, I did not want to believe my own brother was stealing from our grandmother. The diagnosis came suddenly. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The doctor gave Grandma maybe 6 months. She took the news with the same pragmatic strength she had approached everything in her life. Within a week, she had called her attorney a man named Henderson, who had been handling her legal affairs for 30 years. I flew down for what I thought was just a family meeting to discuss her care. It was late September, the air still thick with Florida humidity. Mom had made her usual fuss about hosting everyone, even though Grandma insisted on meeting at her own house. We all gathered in her living room, the same room where we had celebrated countless Christmases and Thanksgivings. Grandma looked small in her armchair, a blanket over her legs. Despite the heat, she always ran cold. But her eyes were fierce and clear. Henderson sat beside her with his briefcase professional and unreadable. What I expected was a discussion about medical power of attorney, maybe funeral arrangements. What I got was my first real lesson in family dynamics and money. Grandma had redone her entire estate plan. The 8 rental properties, worth collectively about $2.4 million, were being placed into something called the Carter Living Trust. Mike, sitting on the couch next to his flavor-of-the-month girlfriend, leaned forward with obvious interest. This was it, his face said. This was the moment he finally got what he deserved. Henderson explained the terms in his measured attorney voice. The properties would not be divided equally among her children, he said. In fact, her only child, my father, would have no ownership stake at all. My father's face went red, but he kept quiet. Grandma had clearly prepared him for this beforehand. Instead, Henderson continued, the trust would be divided between her 2 grandchildren, Mike and myself, but not equally. Mike would receive a one-time payment of $50,000. The remaining properties, the rental income, and all associated assets would go entirely to me. The room erupted. Mike actually stood up, his face purple with rage. He started shouting about how this was insane, how he was the one who had been managing the properties, how he was the one who had the business experience. Dad joined in, his voice rising to match Mike's, demanding to know what Grandma was thinking, cutting out the firstborn grandson like this. I sat there in shock, unable to process what I had just heard. My mother was crying, asking Grandma how she could do this to Mike, to the family, after everything. Grandma just looked at Mike with sad, tired eyes and said 7 words that still echo in my mind. You stole from me for 2 years. The room went dead silent. Mike's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Henderson pulled out a folder thick with bank statements, contractor invoices, receipts. He laid them out on the coffee table with clinical precision. $217,000. That was how much Mike had embezzled from Grandma's rental property maintenance fund over 24 months. Fake invoices, inflated quotes, work that was never done, contractors who did not exist. Mike had gambled it all away. Sports betting mostly, but also some truly stupid investment schemes that promised quick returns. He was in debt up to his eyeballs, dodging calls from bookies, maxed out on credit cards he had hidden from everyone. Grandma had hired a private investigator 6 months earlier, she explained in her quiet voice. She had suspected, but she needed proof. And once she had it, she made her decision. Mike got $50,000 because he was still her grandson, and she was not cruel. But he would never touch her life's work again. I sat there, unable to speak, as my parents turned their fury on Grandma, as Mike tried to deny it, then justify it, then finally broke down begging. The meeting ended with Mike storming out my parents, following him, leaving me alone with Grandma and Henderson. She took my hand, her skin paper, thin and cool. You are going to face a lot of pressure, she told me. They are going to try to make you feel guilty, make you think you should share with Mike with your parents. But I need you to promise me something. Promise me you will protect what I built. Promise me you will not let them destroy it. I promised, even though I had no idea what that would really mean. Grandma died 4 months later, in January. It was faster than the doctors predicted. I was there at the end, holding her hand in the hospice room. Mike showed up for the last 2 days, playing the devastated grandson for the nurses. My parents were there too, going through the motions of grief, while obviously thinking about what came next. The funeral was on a cold Tuesday, one of those rare Florida days where you actually need a jacket. The church was full of people whose lives Grandma had touched, tenants who remembered her fairness. business associates, who respected her integrity. Mike gave a eulogy that made him sound like he had been her devoted caretaker. I said nothing, just sat in the front pew and tried to hold myself together. The storm I had been dreading came that very night. We were back at my parents' house, the house Grandma had actually purchased for them 20 years ago, though they seemed to have forgotten that detail. The funeral guests had left. It was just family now. Mike, my parents, and me. I knew what was coming. I had been preparing myself for weeks. Henderson had warned me, had walked me through every possible scenario. But nothing really prepares you for the moment your family shows you exactly how little you matter to them. Mike did not waste time with subtlety. He walked into the dining room where I was sitting trying to drink a cup of tea with shaking hands, and he dropped a stack of papers on the table in front of me. His girlfriend, a woman named Stephanie, who I had met maybe twice, stood in the doorway with her arms crossed watching, like this was entertainment. It was a waiver of inheritance rights. Mike had clearly had a lawyer draw it up, probably the same one who helped him incorporate his various failed business ventures. The document was designed to look official and intimidating. If I signed it, I would be voluntarily giving up my inheritance, allowing it to revert to the default family distribution, where Mike, as the firstborn grandson, would get everything. "Sign it," Mike said. His voice was hard-cold. No pleas, no explanation, just a command. I looked up at him, this man, who I had idolized as a child, who I had defended countless times when people questioned his choices. "I want to know why you think I should," I said quietly. His face twisted. "Because I need it, Cheryl. I need that money. I have debts, obligations, business opportunities. You have a job, a good salary. You do not need rental income, but I can turn those properties into something real, something big. I can make the Carter name actually mean something." "You mean you can pay off your gambling debts," I said. "You mean you can dig yourself out of the hole you spent 2 years creating while stealing from Grandma." That was when my father stepped in. He had been hovering nearby, waiting for his cue. "Cheryl," he said in that disappointed voice I knew so well, "you are being selfish. Mike is family. He is your brother. This inheritance, it is not just yours. It belongs to all of us. Your grandmother was not in her right mind at the end. The cancer, the medications, they clouded her judgment. She was completely lucid," I said, my hands gripping the teacup so hard I thought it might shatter. She knew exactly what she was doing. She knew Mike stole from her. She knew he would destroy everything she built if she gave him control. My mother appeared then, tears already streaming down her face. "How can you say such horrible things about your brother?" she sobbed. "After everything we have done for you, raised you, supported you, and this is how you repay us, by tearing this family apart." It was masterful, really. The way they tag-teamed me, the way they had their roles perfectly coordinated. Mike, the demanding older brother dad, the disappointed patriarch, Mom, the heartbroken mother. They had probably rehearsed this. "I am not signing," I said. Mike slammed his hand on the table. "Yes, you are. You are signing tonight because I need to take those property deeds to the bank tomorrow morning. I have investors waiting deals ready to close. You are not going to ruin this for me." "What investors?" I asked. "Who would invest with you when you are drowning in debt?" "That is none of your business," he snarled. "Just sign the paper, Cheryl." My father moved to block the doorway. "We are not leaving this room until this is settled," he said, one way or another. Looking back now, I recognize that moment for what it was. It was not a family meeting. It was a hostage situation. They were not asking for my cooperation. They were demanding my capitulation through intimidation and emotional manipulation. I picked up the pen. I let them think they had won. I watched Mike's face light up with victorious satisfaction. I even brought the pen to the paper. Then I set it down and looked at Mike with a smile I did not know I was capable of. "Tell me something, Mike. Are your bookie friends waiting outside, or did you invite them to the celebration party you planned for later?" His face went pale. "How did you know about the party?" "Because Stephanie posted about it on Facebook 3 hours ago," I said. "Congratulations on your big inheritance," she wrote. "Thanks for the heads up that you were already counting your chickens." The room went very quiet. Then right on cue, the doorbell rang. It was not Mike's bookies, though I let him think it might be for just a second. The look of panic that crossed his face was almost worth everything. But no, it was something much better. My mother went to answer it, probably thinking it was a late-arriving mourner. When she opened the door, I heard her confused greeting. "Can I help you?" "Mrs. Carter, I am Attorney Henderson. I am here to see Cheryl." He walked into the dining room like he owned it, which in a technical sense he kind of did, since the house was part of Grandma's trust now. He was not alone. He had brought 2 men in dark suits, private security contractors, the kind with military backgrounds and absolutely no sense of humor. Henderson looked around the room, taking in the scene with professional assessment. The papers on the table, my tear-stained face, Mike's aggressive stance, my father blocking the door. He had seen it all before I realized. This was not his first rodeo with families fighting over money. "Good evening," he said pleasantly. "I apologize for the intrusion, but I needed to personally deliver some documents to Ms. Carter, and I wanted to ensure she was in a position to receive them without any undue pressure." Mike found his voice. "Who the hell do you think you are barging into our home?" Henderson smiled, and it was not a nice smile. "This is not your home, Mr. Carter. This property is owned by the Carter Living Trust, of which Cheryl is the primary beneficiary and trustee. Technically, you are all guests here at her discretion." He opened his metal briefcase, the kind lawyers carry in movies, and pulled out a thick stack of documents. "These are the official property deeds," he said, handing them to me. "All 8 rental properties, now officially transferred to the trust with you as sole trustee." And these he placed another stack on the table, are notices to vacate for any unauthorized occupants currently residing in trust properties. Mike's face went from pale to purple. "What are you talking about?" Henderson pulled out another document, this one with photos attached. "Over the past 6 months, you have moved several of your associates into trust properties without permission, without lease agreements, and without paying rent. You have represented yourself as the owner to various contractors and vendors. You have collected rent payments and deposited them into your personal account rather than the trust account. In short, Mr. Carter, you have continued your pattern of theft, even after Mrs. Carter's death." "That is insane," Mike shouted. "I was managing those properties. I was taking care of them." "You were stealing," Henderson said flatly. "And now you are being evicted. You have 72 hours to remove yourself and your associates from any trust property, or sheriff's deputies will do it for you." The room exploded. My father started yelling about lawsuits, about rights, about how this was all illegal. My mother was crying harder, wailing about her family being destroyed. Mike just stared at me with such pure hatred that I actually felt afraid. But Henderson was not done. He turned to my parents. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter, you currently reside in this home under a life estate provision that Mrs. Carter Sr. established 20 years ago. However, that provision contained a clause allowing the trust to convert your occupancy to a standard rental agreement if circumstances warranted. Given your participation in this attempt to coerce the trustee, I am exercising that option. You have 30 days to either sign a fair market rental agreement or vacate the premises." My mother actually screamed, "You cannot do this. This is our home. We have lived here for 20 years. "And you can continue to live here," Henderson said calmly, "for $1,800 a month, which is below market rate for this neighborhood, or you can choose to leave. That is entirely your decision." I stood up, my legs shaking, but my voice steady. I had practiced this moment with Henderson, but I had not known if I would have the courage when it came down to it. "Mom, Dad," I said, "Grandma gave you this house. She paid off your mortgage, your car loans. She bailed you out more times than I can count. And you thanked her by enabling Mike while he robbed her blind, by pressuring me to give up what she wanted me to have. So yes, this is happening. You can stay and pay rent like any other tenant, or you can go." My father took a step toward me, his face twisted with rage. "How dare you," he started. One of Henderson's security contractors moved between us, not threatening, just present. "Sir, I need you to step back." Dad looked at the contractor, looked at Henderson, looked at me. For the first time in my life, I saw my father realize he had no power in this situation, that I was not his little girl who could be bullied into compliance. Mike was vibrating with fury. "You are making the biggest mistake of your life, Cheryl. You think you can just cut us out. We are your family. You need us. You." "No," I said, and my voice did not shake. "I really do not. That should have been the end of it. In a normal family, maybe it would have been. They would have been angry, hurt, but eventually they would have accepted reality. But my family was not normal, and Mike was not the kind of person who accepted losing. The party Mike had planned went ahead anyway. Apparently he had been so confident I would cave that he had already invited investors, business associates, everyone he wanted to impress. When I left my parents' house with Henderson and his security team, cars were already pulling up, people who had come to celebrate Mike's big score. I went back to my hotel room, a Holiday Inn near the airport. I sat on the bed and shook for about an hour. Then I called my best friend Sarah in Atlanta and cried for another hour. She kept saying I had done the right thing, that I was brave, that Grandma would be proud. I wanted to believe her. The next morning, Henderson called. Mike had shown up at one of the rental properties at 6 a.m., trying to break in to remove items he claimed were his. The tenants had called the police. Mike was cited for trespassing but talked his way out of arrest. "He is escalating." Henderson warned me, "You need to be careful." I decided to stay in Florida for a few more days, to handle things in person. Henderson connected me with a property management company to take over the rentals. We needed to do a full audit, evict Mike's friends, who were squatting in 2 of the units, and make necessary repairs that Mike had been claiming were done, but were not. The property manager, a woman named Rita, who had been in the business for 30 years, went through each unit with me. It was worse than I thought. One property had a roof that was actively leaking, the one Mike had supposedly fixed, for $15,000. Another had mold in the bathroom that was making the tenants sick. A third had a broken AC unit in Florida. Summer heat something Mike said he had replaced, but clearly had not. Rita did not mince words. "Your brother was running a scam," she said. "He was collecting rent, pocketing repair money, and letting these properties deteriorate. Another year or 2, and you would be looking at condemnation notices. Your grandmother's life work would have been destroyed." Standing in that moldy bathroom, looking at damage that could have been prevented, I felt my last bit of guilt about my decision evaporate. Mike had not just stolen money. He had been destroying Grandma's legacy, the thing she had asked me specifically to protect. Over the next 3 days, I worked with Rita to start making things right. We hired real contractors, got real quotes, started real repairs. The numbers were staggering. It would cost about $80,000 to bring all the properties up to proper condition. But the rental income, once everything was fixed and filled with paying tenants, would be substantial, enough to cover the repairs over time and then provide steady passive income. I was starting to see what Grandma had seen, what she had built. It was not just about money. It was about creating something stable, something that could support a family for generations if managed correctly. And Mike would have destroyed all of it to feed his gambling addiction. On the 4th day, Mike made his move. I was at property number 5, meeting with a contractor about replacing the water heater, when my phone rang. It was Stephanie, Mike's girlfriend. She was crying, almost hysterical. "You need to come to your parents' house right now," she said. "Mike is losing it. He is talking crazy, and I am scared." I should have called the police right then, but some stupid part of me still thought I could reason with him, still thought we were family, and that meant something. So I drove to my parents' house, that house that Grandma had bought for them, that house where I had grown up. The party from the night before had apparently continued. There were empty beer bottles on the lawn cars, parked haphazardly in the driveway and street. The front door was open. I could hear shouting inside. When I walked in, it was like entering a nightmare. The living room was trashed furniture, overturned picture frames broken on the floor. Mike's investor friends were all gone. Apparently they had fled when things got ugly. Only Stephanie remained pressed against the wall in the hallway, her eyes wide with fear. Mike was in the kitchen pacing like a caged animal. My parents were there too, looking shell-shocked and terrified. When Mike saw me, his face contorted into something I did not recognize. "There you are," he snarled. "There is the little thief who stole my inheritance." I stayed near the doorway, every instinct screaming at me to run. "Mike, you need to calm down. You need to get help. Help." He laughed, and it was an ugly sound. "You destroyed my life, and you are telling me I need help. Those investors, those people I invited, they all left when they found out the properties were not mine. They were my last chance, Cheryl. My last chance to make something of myself, and you took it away." "You took it away yourself," I said, "when you stole from Grandma, when you lied and cheated and gambled away $200,000. That money was going to be mine anyway," he shouted. "It should have been mine. I am the firstborn. I am the son. What are you? Nobody. Nothing. You are just a data analyst making $50,000 a year. You do not deserve what she gave you." My father stepped forward. "Son, maybe we should all just sit down and talk about this reasonably." But Mike was past reason. He had been drinking. I could smell it on him from across the room. He had been up all night riding the crash of whatever high he had been on when he thought he was about to be rich. And now he was desperate, cornered, and dangerous. "Give it back," he said, his voice dropping to something low and menacing. "Sign the waiver. Give me the properties, and we can all move on. Otherwise, I swear to God, Cheryl, I will make your life hell. I will contest the will. I will sue you. I will drag you through court for years. You will spend every penny on lawyers, and you will wish you had just given me what I wanted." "No," I said simply. That was when he snapped. Mike lunged toward the kitchen counter and grabbed a knife from the block, a big chef's knife that my mother used to cut pot roast. Stephanie screamed. My mother screamed. My father froze his face white as paper. Mike came at me with the knife raised, and I did not move. I could not move. Some part of my brain just shut down, unable to process that this was actually happening, that my own brother was actually threatening to kill me. He grabbed my arm, yanked me toward him, and pressed the knife against my throat. I felt the cold metal on my skin. I saw his face up close, saw the wild desperation in his bloodshot eyes. I smelled the alcohol and sweat and rage. "Sign the paper," he hissed. "Sign it right now, or I swear I will cut you." My voice came out surprisingly steady. No, his hand shook. The knife bit into my skin, just enough to hurt. "Do it, Cheryl. Do not make me do this." I looked him right in the eyes. "You are not going to kill me, Mike. You are a thief and a liar and a failure, but you are not a murderer. And even if you were, it would not matter. The trust is ironclad. If I die, everything goes to charity. You still get nothing." It was a bluff, sort of. The trust actually had provisions for alternate beneficiaries, but Mike did not know that. And in that moment, seeing the realization cross his face, seeing him understand that hurting me would gain him nothing, I watched something break inside him. He was still holding the knife when I pulled my phone from my pocket. My other hand went to my throat where I could feel a small trickle of blood from where the blade had pressed. I put the phone on speaker and dialed 911. 911, what is your emergency? "I am at 4237 Magnolia Drive in Tampa." I said, my voice clear and calm. "My brother is threatening me with a knife. I need police and paramedics. He has been drinking and is not stable." Mike's hand dropped. The knife clattered to the floor. He staggered backward, looking at his hands like he could not believe what he had just done. The 911 operator kept talking to me, asking questions, telling me help was on the way. I answered mechanically while watching Mike collapse onto the kitchen floor, his head in his hands, sobbing like a child. My parents finally moved, rushing to Mike, my mother kneeling beside him, my father picking up the knife and putting it in the sink. Neither of them came to me. Neither of them asked if I was okay. They just comforted the son who had just held a knife to their daughter's throat. I walked outside and sat on the front steps to wait for the police. The morning was beautiful. I remember that clearly. Blue sky, warm sunbirds singing. A perfect Florida winter day. I touched my throat and looked at the small smear of blood on my fingers. Not much, just enough to prove it had really happened. The police arrived within 5 minutes. 3 patrol cars with sirens wailing. Neighbors came out of their houses to watch. The officers separated us, took statements. One of them, a young woman with kind eyes, stayed with me while the paramedics checked the cut on my neck. "It is superficial," they said, "but you should get it looked at properly." Inside the house, I could hear Mike still crying, hear my mother pleading with the officers, hear my father trying to explain that it was all a misunderstanding, that his son was just upset about their mother's death. But I had called Henderson before calling 911. I had texted him what was happening. And Henderson had already sent the police a packet of information, the embezzlement evidence, the trespassing citation from that morning, the pattern of escalating behavior. This was not a grief-stricken grandson having a breakdown. This was a criminal finally facing consequences. They arrested Mike, handcuffed him, and put him in the back of a patrol car while my mother screamed and my father threatened to sue the department. The charges were assault with a deadly weapon, aggravated assault, and financial fraud. The DA would decide later what stuck. I gave my statement to a detective, an older man who had clearly seen every kind of family dysfunction. He did not seem surprised by any of it. "You are pressing charges?" he asked. Not a question, just confirming. "Yes," I said, "all of them. Your parents are saying you provoked him, that you stole his inheritance and drove him to this." The detective looked at me for a long moment, then he nodded. "Okay, we will be in touch about the court proceedings." I went back to my hotel. I took a shower and watched the water run pink with diluted blood. I ordered room service and could not eat it. I called Sarah again and told her everything. She offered to fly down, but I told her I would be home soon. That night my father called me. His voice was cold formal. "Mike is in jail. They set his bail at $50,000. We do not have that kind of money. You need to help us get him out." I hung up without responding. He called back 6 more times. I blocked the number. My mother tried texting. "Your brother could have killed himself in that cell. You are killing him by doing this. What kind of person are you?" I blocked her too. The next morning, I went to the police station. Mike had been moved to county jail. I asked to speak to the detective again. "I want to make sure you have everything you need," I said. "The financial records, the property damage, all of it. I want him prosecuted to the full extent of the law." The detective raised his eyebrows. "Most families do not want to see their relatives in prison. Most families do not try to murder each other over inheritance money," I replied. I stayed in Florida for 2 more weeks, working with Henderson and Rita to get the properties in order. We evicted Mike's squatter friends. We made emergency repairs. We started advertising for new tenants at proper market rates. I met with accountants and set up proper bookkeeping systems. I learned about property management, rental laws, insurance requirements. Henderson walked me through the criminal case. Mike would likely plead down to avoid trial, probably get 3 to 5 years for the assault and fraud combined. My parents were circling the wagons, hiring a criminal defense attorney. They could not afford probably taking out loans. "What about the civil case?" I asked. "Can I sue him for the money he stole?" "You can," Henderson said, "but you probably will not collect much. He has no assets, massive debts. You would win the judgment, but you might never see the money." "I do not care about the money," I said. "I want it on record. I want everyone to know what he did." We filed the civil suit. We documented every stolen dollar, every fake invoice, every lie. It felt like excavating a tomb, bringing all the rot into the light. 3 days before I was scheduled to fly back to Atlanta, my parents showed up at my hotel. The front desk called my room, asked if I wanted them sent up. I almost said no, but some part of me needed to face them one more time. They looked terrible. My father had aged 10 years in 2 weeks. My mother's eyes were red and puffy from constant crying. They sat across from me in the hotel lobby, and for a moment nobody spoke. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "We need you to drop the charges against Mike." I just looked at him. "He is your brother," my mother said. "He made a mistake, yes, but sending him to prison will not fix anything. It will only destroy what is left of this family." "He held a knife to my throat," I said quietly. "He threatened to kill me. That is not a mistake, Mum. That is a crime." You pushed him to it, my father said, and there was anger in his voice now. You took everything from him. You humiliated him in front of his investors. You are vindictive and cruel, and you are doing this to punish us for not making you the favorite. I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. Is that really what you think? It is the truth, he said. I reached into my bag and pulled out an envelope. I had prepared it that morning, knowing this conversation might happen. Inside was a check. Not a large one, just $5,000. Enough for a few months' rent on a modest apartment. This is the last money you will ever get from me, I said, sliding the envelope across the table. It is enough to help you get settled somewhere. Because you are not staying in Grandma's house unless you sign a proper lease and pay proper rent. Those are the terms. My mother started crying again. How can you be so heartless? I am not heartless, I said, and I was surprised by how calm I sounded. I am just done. Done being manipulated. Done being treated like I do not matter. Done sacrificing myself for people who would never do the same for me. Grandma saw what you are. She tried to protect her legacy from you, and I am going to honor her wishes. My father stood up. You are dead to us, he said. You understand that. You are not our daughter anymore. I looked up at him and felt absolutely nothing. Okay, I said. They left. I never saw them again. Mike pleaded guilty to reduced charges and served 18 months. I heard he moved to Alabama, got clean, started working construction. My parents refused the lease and moved to a retirement condo. They told everyone I stole Mike's inheritance. Some believed them. Most who knew the truth did not. I went back to Atlanta and threw myself into therapy, learning boundaries, recognizing manipulation, understanding that choosing myself was not selfish. The properties thrived, generating $8,000 monthly. I paid down repairs, took property management courses, learned the business. 2 years later, I quit my analyst job and moved to St. Petersburg. Rita and I expanded the portfolio to 10 properties. I met someone good who never suggested I share my inheritance with my estranged family. We got engaged. 3 months ago, Mike sent a letter through Henderson's office. One handwritten page apologizing, explaining his recovery, asking nothing. I wrote back accepting his apology, wishing him well but declining a relationship. Some days I am still angry. Some days I feel guilty wondering if I was too harsh. But then I remember the knife my parents choosing him repeatedly. Grandma's voice asking me to protect what she built. I kept my promise. The Carter Living Trust is strong and growing. I am strong and growing. Sometimes the family you are born into is not the family you need. Sometimes love requires boundaries, or it is not really love. Sometimes the bravest thing is walking away from people who will never see your worth. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot build a future on guilt and obligation. You have to choose yourself, even when it hurts, even when it costs everything. Especially then. Have you ever chosen between family and survival? Have you been the scapegoat expected to sacrifice while others take everything? Drop a comment with your story. Subscribe if you believe in choosing yourself. Like if you know sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same. You are not alone in this fight.